Dear people from the streaming, we will wait still a couple of minutes. So we are here waiting for the people. Ofri is there, and dear people we'll start in 2 minutes. The streaming, we will wait still a couple of minutes.
Hi, Ofri.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, and hi everyone also in the room. I think Ofri can see a little bit of the room also.
Yeah.
Sadly, she can't be here in person, but I'm extremely happy that she agreed to join us online tonight. It's an enormous pleasure for me that Ofri will be showing a further development of a lecture performance that Natalia and I saw a few years ago, or I actually saw this year. And I will, for some of you, will already have seen Ofri's contribution to the roundtable yesterday. For those of you online and in the room who haven't, I will very briefly introduce her and what this tonight's event is about, and then pass on to Ofri. She is an artist and researcher who works across and between performance and media. Her work has been exhibited internationally, such as at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City and the Venice Architectural Biennial. And currently she's a visiting scholar at the Institute of Visual Culture at Technische Universität in Vienna and a research fellow at the Amsterdam School for Cultural Analysis. And tonight's lecture performance is titled Device Amnesia, a lecture performance in 2 parts. It will be 2 parts, and there will be a 10 to 15-minute break in between. The lecture performance is actually part of a wider research project that is called Digital Afterness. And I think this is an interpretation of mine that I have sort of gathered from conversations with Ofri. The 3, or in total it will be 3 parts, and we're seeing 2 of them tonight. Consider how memory is produced in the wake of catastrophe and loss, and especially when the question of the future actually becomes a precarious one. And I think with this, I will hand over to you. And I think you said you wanted to say a few words before we start the performance.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you really everyone in the room. I really appreciate the invitation and the kind of flexibility around the changing conditions. Sadly, I couldn't be there in flash, and the ongoing conversation. So as Lisa mentioned, I'm working towards a kind of a big or kind of ongoing research that has both artistic and more theoretical component, titled Digital Afterness, that bring together 3 studies. One that will be in the center of the first part today, and we discussed more extensively yesterday, which is the Brazil Museu Nacional, and specifically its digital remains. And the other one is the island of Tuvalu's existential threat and adaptation to the digital twin. And the third one, which I won't touch upon at all today, is the closure of the Israeli National Archive and the scholasticization of the Palestinian present through datification and the database. And kind of important maybe to kind of zoom out a little bit and say that all of these focusing on notion and kind of knowledge and in cultural institutions that all came to being through colonial practices of collecting and cataloging, but then being institutionalized through the modern nation state project, right? So it's National Museum, National Archive, National Culture, but also came into their ends through kind of the long tail of those colonial practices, whether it's climate change or the governance by neglect. But once they are moving towards digital and data enhanced systems that are identified as rescue plan, they fall into very similar patterns of what's often addressed as digital or data colonialism. So that's kind of to maybe open the lens a little bit. And the other comment I would say that is we will see tonight 2 excerpts from 2 lecture performance, which is a methodology I oftentimes develop during the time of working on a project. So it's kind of my way to avoid object-oriented work of like everything needs to end in either exhibition or in a paper article, but to somehow live in the fold between writing and making, between images and words. Yeah, and as Lisa mentioned, we'll start from 1 and then we'll take a break. As a teacher, I know it's a very bad idea. However, that is the plan because there will be a lot of words. So I hope you enjoyed. Each one is around 20 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let me know if there's any problem, but I'm going to start. The story begins with an error.
I have not been able to see it again after the fire, in fact. It's too cruel. But I'll do it for you. So, let's go.
This story starts with an error. In 6 short hours on Saturday night in early September 2018, flames consumed the biggest collection of Brazilian history.
Of course, I want to tell everything, but the question is, when is the appropriate time to release all that information?
Only a handful of artifacts of the 20 million items that were housed in the museum survived this colossal disaster. To give you a sense of perspective, the collection of the British Museum holds 8 million items. A lobotomy in Brazilian memory. An image of a nation, its lands, and its cultures. This immense encyclopedic collection included priceless archives of pre-Columbian and Indo-American cultures, the oldest human remains ever found in Brazil, an audio recording of indigenous languages, many of which are no longer spoke. Also 5 million butterflies and other anthropoids, 12,000 years old fossil of human remain, thousands of ceramics, and a fresco from Pompeii. A meteorite that hit Earth in 1784 survived the fire, no problem. Pedro de Bendego travels from space to Brazilian soil of Bahia and rests still on the ground for several thousand years. An irregular mass, 5,360 kilograms of iron covered by 4 inches of layer of oxidation with numerous depressions on the surface and cylinder-like holes oriented parallel to its greater length. Part of its lower portion was lost during landing and left a smooth surface on one face. Beside iron, it also consists nickel, cobalt, phosphorus, and traces of sulfur and carbon in much smaller quantities, only measured by the million. Ever since it came in contact with the human eye, the iron been on the move again. The boy, Domingos de Mota Betelo, grazed cattle on the farm near the present town of Monte Santo when he first spotted it. The year was 1784. Given the slow movement of people and commerce, The news on the finding spread quickly. In 1785, Governor D. Rodriguez Vincennes arranged for it to be transported to Salvador. However, the meteorite's excessive weight made the transportation difficult. The cart it was on lost control, and the meteorite fell into a dry steam bed only 180 meters away from the spot it was originally found. The meteorite did not travel with the people, but the people started to visit Bendigo. The Royal Society published drawings of it in its periodicals, and the first reproduction of the metal rock started to orbit the visual sphere. The year was 1818. 70 years later, it was lifted and rolled to the National Museum and stopped right by the door. First room, passed by the armed personnel and metal turnstiles. It was resting in the National Museum pedestal for 130 years. Always the first one to view, the first image to take. Then the fire happened. No major damage. Stilled. First room behind the metal turnstiles, all covered with ashes from burned neighboring objects. Images were uploaded and downloaded. Linked were shared. Posts were posted. Pictures transmitted up towards space and fell down to Brazilian earth. What are the means which the earth sees? After the ashes and images rested, I clicked on the links and entered the museum again. Click. No. To the left or to the right. Double click. I passed the two blurred-faced armed personnel and glided through the metal turnstiles. On my way to the staircase, I dragged my cursor around and above the Bendigo, smearing glitches with depressions and cylinder-like holes, forming geodigital irregular mass of image matter. One would hope that contemporary technology would offer its most treasured artifacts a better chance of survival than the Library of Alexandria. It feels almost unimaginable that so many valuable objects were simply wiped off the face of the earth without leaving any digital trace. At the age of algorithmic reproduction, when automatic backup is the default standard, too often we need to fight for the right to be forgotten. But the economy of remembering everything is often still entangled with the geography of the right to be remembered. But you see, this storage space was leaking for a while now. Storage. Over 90% of the national collection was lost simply because there was not enough water in the fire hydrants to kill the blaze. An error, a break within the ordered world. For some time now, the pressure in the fire hydrants was too low, but the high pressure of real estate and industry developers didn't stop pumping, bringing the system on the brink of collapse. This is a dry season for fire hydrants and water pumps, and local reservoirs and natural watersheds. For some times now, bodies of water are slowly dehydrating under official priorities. For modern water, dry became a condition. This was an old building with all sorts of old lives and no liquid assets. The city was busy building the Museum of Tomorrow. It was a question of liquidity. Fire was the method. A fragmented and eclectic digital collection survived from the ruins. The images available on Wikimedia Commons, all taken by small interest groups and visitors who captured highlights from the collection that are now stored on their personal devices or cloud services and shared via social media. The images became a portal to much other data they have been slowly aggregating. Other images they saw, locations they checked in at, a personal library organized by geolocation or facial recognition software, social networks, and other data points. They were partial, anecdotal, broken, but also very much connected. Each file named by its contributor. One named malsakshells.jpg. The other, Sophia and Dino 11. The primary school-age Sophia and her purple stuffed monkey with long arms are now main protagonists of the National Brazilian collection, with a few dozen images named after her. A new princess in what once was a palace, then a museum, and now is a site of collective witnessing of things being left, acknowledged, and the unacknowledged. There is also a virtual tour, a product of Google Arts and Culture, where one can easily visit the no longer existing museum. No more boxes and cabinets. The museum information is now stored through the same technology as your streets. Long ago, collections have become toxic warehouses for genocidal practices and histories of colonial dispossessions and erasures, where objects and bodies are the storage space of a transgenerational traumas. Cabinet burnt in the fire and melted into wiki stockrooms for digital recollections, or used by Google for data correlations. Storages are new species of spaces. Leaks. Through Rio de Janeiro's night sky, ashes flew up in the air and fell on the ground. Burnt anthropoids and ancient cockroaches dropped in backyards. Employee surveys and rejected papers fell quietly on stoops and balconies like foliage leaves. Index cards landed on the neighbor's front porch. Burnt particles from another life took local flights and landed much closer to home. Ashes scattered and spread out the words like silent witnesses carried by the whispering wind. The first edit on the Portuguese Wikipedia was made by an anonymous user at 8:40 p.m. UTC on the night of September 2nd, minutes after the reports on the TV began. An hour and a half later, an entry dedicated to the fire itself was created. In the following hours, the collections on the Wikipedia page, which was once only updated by dedicated contributors, started to circulate globally. Here is a stray cat purring between two columns with peeling paint. There, a photo of indigenous hunter. The very low-angled photo, clearly taken by a child, exposes a leak in the upper corner that was fixed with layers of brown masking tape. The museum lawns in the winter, the same lawns in the summer, and multiple copies of the same shot that was never deleted, offering a generational personal testimony against institutional amnesia. Skins. The fire happened, leaving scars all over. Inside the hazy galleries, a new skin started growing. Skins were leaving their toxic bodies, growing like a free creature inside the great halls. Smell of killing. The skin of a young woman from Minas Gerais comes off her bones. The Chilean mummy peels a layer from its folded cover. A mummified cat sticks to the snake skin. Burned skin grow their own living mesh. And people started to ink the museum on their own skin. MN7712V. New black ink on the arm of paleontologist Beatrice Homseder marked the serial number of a crocodile fossil they were studying. 0606, a geographer, Susanna Matos, shared her birthday with the museum. The ritual of marking started small and grew via the social epidermis into a small movement. Museo Unpale, Museum on the Skin. Entomologist Ivin Sousa tattooed her lab window bars where toucans regularly landed. Architect Marco Herman, who planned the roof renovation, traces the blueprint of the museum facade. He kissed the ink before it dried. The skins were faster than the words. A social skin was coming together, wearing the museum of mankind. The skin is witnessing. The rage is inked. Recovers. Pedro Luis loves ashes and sarcophagi. Ashes are the best storytellers, and sarcophagi are the best mystery form. An expert of Egyptian monuments, he was brushing dust for a living, if you can call it a living. His work in the National Museum was like living in a giant Russian doll-shaped sarcophagus, a memory chamber of all sorts of things that once called life are now, oops, a memory chamber of all sorts of things that once called life are now kept in jars and glass cases, register forms and long lists, catalogs and exhibition shots and photocopies, many photocopies. Also slides and films, tapes and floppy disks, CD-ROMs and memory sticks that sometimes reminded him of skaters. Moving between rooms and boxes, he imagined his workplace is a giant beast fed with dead life forms and memory forms. Each has a copy, a metabolic loop. But for Pedro, dead where was life is, so life was good. For some times now, Pedro is using his own toolkit to excavate his own workplace. Coffins and amulets, staples and line levels, and scepters like memory sticks. New ashes consumed the old ashes. New death consumed old death. The matter that recorded the evidence of violence is devoured by its own materiality, necrometabolism. Pedro pushes and measures and put them in boxes. He thinks of the Sonoma people who lived in the Yanomami Valley land, who destroy the marks of the dead by consuming their own corporality. The meticulous practice of remembering to forget include drinking the liquids that came out of the deceased, pulverizing their bones, consuming the ashes and eating the rest mixed with banana porridge. The dead have the right to be forgotten. Their own deeds, forget them. Their own life, erase them. Their belonging must be burned. The metabolic system is the hell of a mnemonic device. Pedro stuck boxes in rooms. A colleague tells Pedro, the original pieces that were there are part of our conquest through the struggle of our loved one who are not here. Now we have memories, more than we live because they are living with us. And Pedro thinks of living, of doing, and thinking with them, with us, dead or alive. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. And that's it. Time for a break.
Thanks, Ofri. So we will take a 10 to 15-minute break now and then see the second part, device amnesia.
Thank you.
Ofri, whenever you feel ready, you can just turn on your video, but you can also take a few more minutes. Hello again.
Hello.
Should we?
I don't see you at all, so tell me when you're ready.
I think we are.
Okay, let's do it. So thanks for coming back, whoever came back. I don't see you. But yeah, let's do it. So this lecture is titled Device Amnesia, and again is part of a full lecture performance, and this is an excerpt. We are thinking. In 2021, Tuvalu Minister for Justice, Communication and Foreign Affairs, Simon Coffey, made headlines when he addressed the UN Climate Change Conference. We are thinking, he told the world, but so is everyone else. The pre-recorded speech received a punchy twist when the camera zoomed out, revealing Coffey standing knee-deep in his suit and tie, delivering his speech, a lectern set up in the sea. The least visited country in the world, where the local airport is also used as a football field, is routinely subjected to the oceanic king waves that turn its single landing strip into a water slide. The weather, says local, does not only steal the land and destroy our plantations, but it also separates our families from one another. In Tuvalu, the weather is physical, social, spiritual, and very political. It's not a noun, but a verb, and every day its density increased, and it becoming more and more pervasive. We will not stand idly by the weather as the water rises around us, Coffey promised. And sure, he didn't.
I'm the world's first digital nation. Our land, our ocean, our culture are the most precious assets of our people, and to keep them safe.
The following year, the minister of the self-described country that almost nobody knows sent another video to the climate change conference. The video was highly produced, yet something about it felt odd, almost as it looked too realistic. In it, Ofri appears again, standing on a digital version of Tuvalu, the smallest of Tuvalu's 9 islands and the first one expected to disappear due to sea level rise. From the micro-island's digital replica, Coffey announced the nation's future now, to become the first digital nation using a digital twin. Our digital migration has begun, states the newly launched nation's website, which was produced and designed by a branding agency, promised a radical survival method using advanced technology that will outlive its geographic territories. It's an island made of data, but no data is an island. I never visited Tuvalu. Neither did you. We are the island's absent visitors. Everything I know from afar. What I know about it involves the act of islanding, of separating the island from itself. What I know about it is made by snap captures made by others, recorded on their devices. How do we, fellow travelers, enter the island that is almost gone without ever being there? Raleigh 35. In the fall of 1982, Her Majesty the Queen came to a short visit in Tuvalu. The former British colony has just joined the Great British Commonwealth, so a visit was in order. As per usual, most photos taken that day were taken by official photographers, collecting the world one frame at a time. Here's the head of the state is seen the Duke of Edinburgh by her side, carried ashore on a traditional canoe. There, they are wearing flowers crown given by a young girl. Each frame possesses a slice of the island's realities, which is made for and owned by the Royal Archive. The island colony and the camera are tools of the empires, now both covered by watermarks, platelism. I scroll down and stop by this picture. Without taking her white gloves off, the Queen, in her long sleeve floral dress and matching hat, is captured holding a gold-coated pocket Raleigh 35 camera that covers her face entirely. Its leather black case is dangling in half air. What caught the Queen's attention that made her pull her own personal device? The popular mini camera was originally designed especially for women, branded as the baby Raleigh. Like the island, the golden camera was part of the Commonwealth. It was given to the Queen on her visit to Raleigh's factory in Singapore. With high labor costs in Europe, British Singapore offered the German company affordable workers, good factory sites, and tax holidays, not unlike Tuvalu. I never saw this photo, neither did you. We are its absent viewers. What sows the rolly that day snapped royal visits? What was recorded in its episodic memory made out of light-sensitive chemical and transparent plastic? We can never grasp anything fully and frontally. Rather, it is in the fragments of how it operated, in the traces and oblique testimonials that is left behind, that we can note that event in the present. That standard snapshot taken that morning are visual imprints of the order of things.
Tuvalu has little in the way of land or natural resources, but we believe, Your Majesty, that we have a happiness, culture, and friendliness which are perhaps more important than pure material wealth. We hope that in the next few hours, we can show you some of these qualities. Welcome to Tuvalu.
The order of things of what is already socially pre-thought, the South and the nature and the untold beauty of both, far away, yet not out of reach. In them, the island is served to the viewer before she consciously comes to herself, fixing in emulsion the power relation that is already known to her. But what though the order of things herself? I want to slow down on the unknown moment that caught her attention and made her send her hand to the device and click. Maybe she was nauseated from the waves and the flowers. Maybe she felt again like a little girl. Maybe the order of things needed a contact proof of the order of things. For herself, she needed the moment of slicing out a piece of the island unexpectedly and violently, producing an encounter with a disclosed world, framing a moment with the rollies' sharp edges, turning the island into her own assets. If you come to save it, the island has sharp lines that separates the sea from the land. If you come to rescue it, you often call it riscape, as if the shoreline is the distinct place, as if the island needs to be rescued from the devouring ocean, as if the Nine Island can be sliced unexpectedly and violently and saved from the sea that made them and connect them. If you are en route to Tuvalu these days, you might speak the dialect of the climate fighters, the tongue of the solution finders, of the edge markers and the good doers, and the order of things knowers, of the protectionists, of the problem fixers, and the photo takers, and the crisis solvers, and the data diggers. That the name seekers, and that combine holidays and assets and islands, exactly like what happened in 1995. Twitch TV. By 1985, US scientist John Postel, who initiated the internet top-level domain, assigned first three country codes: US or United States, UK or United Kingdom, and IL for Israel. Within a decade, an entire almanac was formed. IN for India, BR for Brazil. TV was for Tuvalu. In June 1998, a small group of strangers made a short trip to Tuvalu to see its prime minister. They were there to make a real estate deal. The property they were after was 2-letter piece of virtual land. Only 3 years before, in 1995, life in Tuvalu went on untouched by the strange, wired new realities. When the International Organization of Standardization's 2-letter country codes were adopted as top-level domains for every nation in the world. After receiving a fax from American offering to help them market it, Tuvaluans discovered that the TV domain had already been assigned by another American computer company who recognized the digital terra nullius. They managed to reclaim it. TV is, after all, they were TV land. But what the bidders on the cyber parcel didn't know is that Tuvaluans are already sold their unused phone numbers before offshore customers. They were too naive then. The numbers were sold for sex phone use, and they were now suspicious towards the new global digital rush. But in 1997, in exchange to $50 million upfront and an undisclosed share of future revenue, the Nature granted information.ca of Toronto an exclusive right to the TV domain, names until 2048. Prime Minister Pineo said, "We have been dependent on aid for so long. Sometimes our sovereignty has been compromised." Like the land grabs of the past, the wild world web was up for digital grab, with new megalords on small island landmarks. There gone the 90s. Following a delays in payment, and .tv contract was reassigned to California-based Idea Lab, which later acquired by VisitSign. The .com heydays are over. Although .tv bragged that these are almost the most meaningful 2 letters in the world, not everyone takes those 2 letters mean television. TV was shorthanded for transvestites. She-male TV, cross-dresser TV, and tranny TV have been snatched by eager buyers. By doing business with remote territories comes with territories. The Fifth Avenue digital art sale platform, Artsy, transitioned into artsy.net after SY suffix was drawing negative attention during the Syrian humanitarian crisis. The popular Bitly had to redirect to bitly.com due to political upheaval in Libya that made the domain difficult to hold onto. The artificial intelligence startup New Darling suffix AI goes to Anguilla, a British overseas territory in the Caribbean. Not everyone is Twitch TV. When the Amazon-owned king of live streaming content start using its own URL, Twitch TV, the island domain was on the king waves again. A new deal was sealed, and the TV land is now poised to make an estimated 10 million a year, which is about 10% of its GDP. The old sense. After securing a lifeline from a video streamer, the least visited country in the world started to manage its entire island as a data asset. Accenture. Following the move into a blockchain national ledger and considering digital nation insurance, the world's first paperless society, Future Now project includes migrating Tuvalu's nation knowledges into the digital twin on the metaverse. It's like having a backup plans to migrate in case of an emergency would ensure the survival of its people. Accenture business unit in charge of the project are describing their mission as redefining how the world works, operates, and interacts, using a spectrum of digitally enhanced worlds, realities, and business models. Shaped by national, subnational, supranational, and global infrastructure, the twin was designed to virtually simulate and optimize human and non-human decision-making. The digitization of Tuvalu is anything but a purely technical endeavor. It is based on separation, isolation, and islandization of knowledge, splicing unexpectedly and violently, producing an encounter with disclosed world. In Tuvalu, turning living culture into profitable asset is not a metaphor. How to become the people of a scene that is characterized by absence. We can never grasp anything fully and frontally. Rather, it is in the fragments of how it operated, in the traces and oblique testimonials it left behind that we can connote the event of the present. Okay. I don't hear you guys, but there is great. Lisa, I can't hear you.
I think I'm still muted on the Zoom call. Or can you hear me now? Now, yes. Thanks, Ofri.
Thank you.
I hope you can also see the space a little bit and people now to get a little bit of a sense of what's going on here. I think I want to ask a few questions, but open it up to you as well as soon as possible. So whenever you have a question, also feel free to articulate it. I know that Ofri is keen on hearing your responses and your impressions. But maybe to situate the research a little bit more, I would like to ask you about the wider research project that these two lecture performances are part of. And the wider research project is called Digital Afterness. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your understanding of afterness in the digital realm and how you chose these 3 case studies.
Yeah, I mentioned part of it before, and I think when I look at afterness, I think not only in terms of temporality, which is the most obvious way to think of something that comes after, but much more of also spatially and as an epistemological state, but also afterness not so much as something that ended or leave through or kind of haunted, or terms that been, or ruined terms that been discussed yesterday, but much more of a state that is, from one hand, offering a critical perspective on technology and the idea of rescue or maintenance or save digitally from one hand, and potentially, and that's been developed mainly in the Brazil project, as a state that, as a proposition, but I usually think about it as a state that needs practice in order to be activated. So in Brazil, which we also discussed yesterday, the collapse of the collection offer also some sort of potential to unlearn indexicality and as an attitude, and to form it. So when I looked at what survived, I didn't look only at the digital or only what the museum did, what survived in the matter, but try to propose some sort of new alliances that are possible between matter form that survive, body and embodied forms. I spoke about skins today, but also social order and the data, and to form some sort of kind of new relation between those 3 elements that are not so much divided by objects or its relation to a specific index or catalog system, and not so much on the divide between the living and the non-living. So afterness in that way is both a critical term towards technology and a way and kind of an arena to think with practices and to unlearn indexicality.
And maybe what you also mentioned at the beginning of this lecture performances, this is also related to your understanding of performance as a method.
Yeah. So I come from performance and from working in institutions and a lot about institutions and technology. But in this set of work, I try to use methods taking from performance, from collective work, whether they're movement or, sometimes they're kind of, taking shape in the virtual, oftentimes in the virtual space, but different knowledges from performance and performance practice to not so much towards a product, towards, developing a new piece, but much more into kind of situate within those remains, or situate in this space of transition between the physical and its data afterlives. and by to form relations with data objects, organize them, invite people to be there, form different kind of encounters. And yeah, so performance in this entire projects became a research methodology, and very important for me. It's almost like, you know, like when you make a sourdough and you have the culture. So the project is almost like a culture, and it produces a lot of different, it produces pieces of academic writing and then speculative writing, but also events that are ad hoc and they're hour long, taking shape in, I don't know, WhatsApp group or in virtual tour, and then they end in different gatherings, and then also lecture performance. So it's kind of, it doesn't have like one product, but in many ways it keep feeding itself into, I don't know, like an environment of interest.
I think maybe this also takes me to the next question. One of the things that is in a way also bothering me in your performances is that a lot of the materials you work with are colonial documents, and they are actually they speak to instances of violence, different forms of violence, be it violence against indigenous communities that have been almost eradicated or dispossessed of their cultural heritage, and also the slow violence of climate change that, of course, also nations in the so-called global south and different oceanic nations are most concerned with. And I was wondering how you deal with the gaze towards these documents, whether, because I find it in my own practice also, I find it how to deconstruct the perpetrator gaze is a constant struggle and issue for me. Of course, it should also be. But I wondered what kind of practices or methods you have developed towards maybe something like a disobedient gaze.
It's beautiful. I mean, maybe one thing I would say is that because my interest is in institutions and not so much in archival documents. I mean, by definition, these are very hierarchical and you know, and there are structures of power, but it's a different entry point than, you know, looking at a specific archive or a specific, you know, I don't know, item or an object. So it's not directly related to the question, but I think it's somehow important because it's looking again at a shift from, let's say, a museum to a different form of, I would say, very violent, you know, a digital or data corporate structure. I think part of it, and because all of those objects are either, or subject of studies are either gone or in a state of extreme destruction. I mean, part of the decision, and because I'm looking at their kind of digital afterlife, part of the decision, which is kind of acknowledging the outer gaze and also respecting the kind of avoiding the visitor, the quick snapper method, is working with what's remained and what's available online and turning them into a host, turning them into a meeting point, into a site of, you know, a site of happening without and avoiding the travel, but also, you know, this kind of being the visitor from far away. It's very far away from, I would say, documentary practices that come and document and trying to reveal or some truth or untold stories. It's kind of staying, if you may, with the trouble of what's remained, which is oftentimes very accidental, or what I can reach from, you know, from what I find, and working with that. I don't know if it answered.
Yeah, I think to me it sometimes felt like you have a little bit of a parasitic position, and not only in its ambiguous sense.
Mm-hmm.
You also, the story of Sophia, but also it felt like other people's devices become the eyes through which we encounter certain stories or narratives that we wouldn't have access to without them.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like in this way we were sneaking into other people's devices, and I was interested in this relational bond between the device you use and the device that has recorded the material that you engage with. I think this is more a question about leaking lens in the end, or maybe not also. And the blurry boundary between this, the parasitic and the extractive, maybe.
You know, it's good that we talk about it, and maybe we can open it to others in the room and their thoughts about it, because I feel like there's almost no. It's all kind of about measuring distances. If you want to, if you want some close, I mean, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. The parents, or I don't know, someone uploaded Sophia's photos. They are in the public domain. I didn't dig into any specific archive. They are open to the public. And also, just as a side comment, with the quite few conversation I had with Wikimedia activist in Brazil, this is a very kind of case-specific decision, because let's say if a parent of a kid will upload their photo to the site of the Metropolitan Museum, the entry, the Wikipedia entry of the Metropolitan Museum, the community will take it down in, you know, in milliseconds. But here, because of the very few remains, they had a lot of discussions of what will stay there. So this is just a side note. I mean, because I work with such extreme cases, and because everything from the event to the digital is so saturated with the question you just, you know, posed, it's a constant, I don't know, consideration of what feel comfortable and gentle, what feels comfortable to others, or using what's there as almost like a room or container, a host, and make the meeting with the people and the conversation with them and the events central to what stays. Yeah, but it's also full with like holes and lacunas and yeah, an event of not noticing, I'm sure.
Would anyone here like to pose a question to Ofri? I think Natalia has raised her hand. Give us a second. We're passing on the microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Ofri. Good to see you. Yeah, it's so beautiful to see both lecture performance together. The second one for me is the first time, and yeah, and also I saw.
Also for me, the first time.
Ah, okay, great.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, we talking about afterness. I think we are just going back in time a little bit since yesterday, the round table that was very intense, interesting for us to combine this both events, and then at some point, there was a sort of misunderstanding, but I think in the end it made a lot of sense that that we are confused if you are talking about the National Museum or the Domingo no Golpe, that was at some for us is kind of the same part of the same trauma in a way. So it's kind of always a bit going back to this topic of the National Museum. That is something that I was also researching, and then that's where we met in a conference at the time. But actually, I think I'm more curious to hear more about the second project, the second lecture performance, and then how both are connected in terms of talking about a museum that didn't exist anymore. Then I ended dealing with this afterness of remains, and then at the same time, like this environment debate about an island that is about to disappear, so kind of predicting their disappearance, so kind of how that if it was originally planned, the sequence, how I just wanted to hear a little bit more from you the connection of the two.
Yeah, I mean,
things.
you know, events in the world are not like identical, right? Those two events, or those two, I don't know, long event, long-lasting events have their similarities and differences, of course. But the way I look at that and kind of look at this idea of digital afterness is through. So when I kind of write about it, I look more specifically at element of. I write pretty massively about digital twins, but also specifically the aspect of capturing culture, whether it's material cultures, embodied knowledge, anything from how do you capture on a digital twin the practice of weaving or basket making, which is something that you learn with your hands. And so of course in Tuvalu there is element of museum as well, but also a living culture and vernacular knowledge that is unclear what is the plan, and for that to be digitized or datafied, and also if it's it might just be eradicated all completely. So what is a nation and its cultures and material cultures when it's now meant to be transferred on a digital twin? So going back to the question, what is similar between it's actually three studies, are all they're all national institutions. So they're public and they're national, and they all came to being. The third one I mentioned is the archive, the National Archive of Israel, came to being through different aspects of colonial culture, specifically collecting and cataloging, but then came into their different ends through the long tail of imperialism or late capitalism, whether it is climate crisis or the Brazilian context, which is kind of cuts anything from lack of public support and what we often referred as governing by neglect. And so that's kind of another similarity. So they're all on the verge of extinction, loss, or social death. But my specific interest is how kind of the politics of the kind of data enhanced world is playing a role of the savior, or of the, you know, of where things are going to keep living, while there is a shift of in governmentality from the nation state into a different model of, you know, of coloniality, shift by corporations. So basically, part of what's happening here is a complete privatization of these knowledges and you know, and cultures, and each one of those projects are being managed and hold the, you know, managed by a specific chosen or unchosen corporation that is also holding those assets. But also, when I proposed from island to asset, is also become, you know, they are used for other data processing and commercial use. It's not even staying in what it, you know, as data set, basically. So I hope it's clear enough.
Maybe could I add to this question about the how you understand amnesia, because I feel like there are several layers of amnesia that you're addressing.
Yeah, that's a good one for me to think more about. I mean, I think in this lecture performance, I hope to take basically total. There's Google also there, but not tonight. And to, you know, in at the first lecture performance, I spoke about the known law of the right to be forgotten, and, you know, and the need for forgetting in relation to the right or the need to be remembered. So there's always it's it's a big entanglement, because there is an over remembering, over documenting, I mean, everything stays with us, while there's also a massive processes of erasure or forgetting, or, I mean, I'm going back to what Gisele said yesterday, or I don't know, of amnesia in those processes of what stays in. And I think Tuvalu is a great example, because I don't know, one need to be, I feel like one need to question this statement of everything we are, everything that is Tuvaluan knowledge is going to be transferred into the digital replica. And it's important to say that it's not only a simulation. Digital twin is designed to actually work not as a museum, right? So Tuvalu is not like captured as a museum. The product is designed to actually, it's a recursive logic. It's the real life affect the digital affect the real life. In you know, and the main goal is usually not preservation, but future planning and optimization. So what happened when it's a layered culture with many you know, even primal unnamed qualities is being moved, transferred into such structure? What is being eradicated? What is being under erosion? What is being under advanced, you know, processes of, yeah, for amnesia? And in here, but I just kind of lightly played with that, is also kind of what the machines themselves might remembered, which was some of the text I read in the first one is part of a project called Testimonies of Things, where I kind of try to play with speculative writing and write the story of the event through 6 entities, starting with deep time, meteorites, going to water, ashes, skins, and then JPEG and cursor. So here it was just a little, the beginning of that thinking as well.
Yeah, I think what's beautiful about both lecture performances is that they show that even digital islanding is never really, it's impossible to sever the ties that related to the physical world. And I've read in preparation for this talk that also the Tuvalu people, they're looking for ways to migrate and to find residents.
There will be, the plan is there will be, and there is one just treaty that was signed with Australia, but there are now between 11 to 12,000 people living on the island, but they will be what we call climate refugees. Within 20 to 30 years times, they would not, the island won't be livable for human, so they will migrate. The question of so when you start to think about Tuvalu, and there's a lot of writing about Tuvalu. A lot of it is from climate researchers and from the aspect of international affair, because the status of a digital nation, and I didn't mention it tonight, but the term First Nation is a very, it's an indigenous term that is very, intentionally is not tied to citizenship. So you can be First Nation in Canadian or American or others. And here there is some kind of a word play, but it's also extremely complicated, both legally and in any other perspective of what is the first digital nation. The term kind of in a play of in-cite, there is a term now of ex-cite nations, so nations that, and Tuvalu is the canary in the coal mines, but it won't be the last. So how do we think legally and in terms of international affair, but also in terms of managing data assets about a nation that has no physical land, which is by now still part of the definition of a nation.
Especially as producing and consuming data are part of the climate change problem, no? It's also a little bit paradoxical that that they decided to transfer their nation into the digital realm, but actually running these servers costs a lot in terms of ecological resources.
Yeah, so I think, and there's more and more writing about it. I just referred it a little bit, this idea of riskscape and even the words, the terminology of saving and rescuing, and then as you mentioned, the environmental aspects of such nation. I think one of the things that is so interesting for me in this project, and also in the pursuit project, that is actually full with it's riddled with holes. There's no, and it's going back, maybe traveling back to your earlier question about the colonial gaze. There's almost no place to position oneself, which is inside or outside, is clean and clear from any biases or colonial. I mean, it's always so unstable, and you always you look at one thing and you kind of unstitch another territory of I don't know, of problematic. So yeah, which for me is an interesting place to be.
Are there more questions from the room?
It's late. Beer time.
Thank you very much, Ofri, for sharing for the first time the device amnesia part and connecting it into the wider project. And I look forward to seeing the full project with the third part, hopefully soon.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation and for this great conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Ofri. Take care.
Bye-bye. Good night.